Good morning, everyone. Sorry for the delay. We will go ahead and get started with the Subcommittee on General Government. We have 4 budgets, I believe, and it's Department of Administration. You may proceed, Mr. Oh, sorry. Can you call the roll, Madam Secretary?
Assemblywoman Backus. Present. Assemblywoman Brown May. Here. Assemblywoman Kasama. Here. Assemblyman Miller. Here. Assemblyman O'Neill. Here. Senator Goicoechea. Here. Senator Harris. Here. Assemblywoman Peters. Here. Chair Neal.
Here. So with that being taken care of, Mr. Robb, go ahead.
Jack Robb, Director, Department Administration, for the record. Good morning. Good snowy morning. I'm ready for this to be done. I don't know about you, but today we're going to go through Department Administration. This is our leadership team at Department Administration. I noticed this morning before I got here that we do have one error in that our senior appeals officer did retire. We will change that slide out. Currently, we do not have a senior appeals officer, but we will get that updated. The next slide, Department Administration. Our goal is to deliver transparent internal government services. We plan, maintain critical state infrastructure and security of state processes, equip state agencies and employees to support Nevada's needs. Our goals are to improve transparency, internal services, support positive workplace culture and staffing expertise, provide responsive customer service, and ease of access for customers, agencies, employees, and the public. The base budget for account 1337 continues the funding of 5 employees. The Director's Office at Department Administration is extremely lean. The Director's Office supports 11 divisions and 595 employees. The Director's Office supports the Nevada Commission on Women. The Director also serves as Chair of the Public Employee Benefit Program, serves as a member of State Public Works Board, serves on the Information Technology Advisory Board, the Committee to Approve Schedules and Retention for Deposition of Official State Records, and serves as executive member on the Smart 21. Budget account enhancements, just standard computer replacements, year 1, 1,860, year 2, 9,300. And that's all I have for the Director's Office, and I will go to Daniel Marlowe at this point to go over Administrative Services Division, unless you have any questions.
Good morning. Daniel Marlowe, Administrator for Admin Services Division, Department of Administration. Our office provides fiscal and accounting support for a wide range of agencies. We'll look at that in just a minute. It is a small office, kind of divided in 3 different sections. We have our ASO 4, over the analysis and procurement section. Analysis provides SWI-CAP data management, statewide billing, and a lot of the rate support with the rate development. Our procurement team procures goods and services for all of our client agencies. Our ASO 3 is over our accounting and CIP section, so they provide invoice processing, journal voucher entry, accounts receivable and billing for services, and our capital improvement team provides the backbone for the Public Works Division and the agencies that are operating under the capital improvement team. Our ASO 2 provides our budget support through budget analysts for all of our client agencies, and then we have some administrative staff. Overall, it's a small division of 32 FTE. Our client portfolio is vast. As you can see here on this slide, the size of the boxes are the number of budget accounts, not necessarily the dollars. We'll look at that in a minute. But we have constitutional offices under the governor's office, lieutenant governors, some proposed new agencies, Department of Administration, Capital Improvement Program. You've seen me at several of these budget hearings, kind of all over the place, not just Department of Administration. If you look at the governor's recommended budget for the revenue funding source for the accounts that we provide support to, the vast majority is interagency transfers. Those are the internal service funds through the billings, other funds through fees and general collection there. Very small amount of general fund at 4% and federal fund of 1%. Our fiscal responsibility is kind of separated in two different aspects. First, we have our operating budgets, $1.3 billion in the governor's recommended budget. For the executive budget accounts, it's 53 budget accounts across 10 different agencies. Again, that's departments, constitutional offices, boards, and commissions, and just about $1 billion in governor's recommended budget expenses. Along with that, there's 19 budget accounts that are non-executive across 6 different agencies and a current authority of $33 million. The other aspect is that fiscal responsibility for the capital improvement program, and that's currently proposed at $1.5 billion. There's 20 budget accounts, 5 of which are bond custodial accounts since the change in the 78th legislative session. That includes 19 CIP extensions, approximately 21 million, 21 CIPs that are continuing, 336 million, and then the proposed 23 CIP of 1.2 billion. This slide, you can see the work programs that were processed by calendar year through our office, just one metric of the workload that our office does. And as you can see, over the years, that has continuously grown, and the lines on the graph are our staffing. So the orange line is our overall FTE. It's actually decreased 1 starting in FY18, and the blue line is our budget account staff. There are kind of CFOs for the agencies that we support, and that increased 1 in 2016 has been constant ever since. So we've had this massive increase in workload with all the different agencies coming on board with not the commensurate change in staffing. Our division enhancement requests, the first one is E245 to add licenses for a document management system. E710 is the standard computer replacement, and E240 is to add 1 accounting assistant 3 and 1 management analyst 3 within the capital improvement team. We are in discussions with the governor's finance office regarding potential additional staff to support the final capital improvement program size, and staffing to support potential new client agencies on the operating budget size. We are still in the discussions. Nothing's been finalized at this point with that. And with that, that is overview of the Administrative Services Division.
All right, thank you for that. So we're going to go ahead and take some questions before you guys get to the human resource management piece. All right, I believe I have, is it Shay, Assemblywoman Bacchus?
It is, thank you, Chair. I had a question regarding your guys' reserves. What is the agency's plan to address the insufficient reserve levels in this budget in each of the biennium, the 2023 and to 2025?
Matthew Tuma, for the record, are we talking about 1337 or 1371?
We're talking about 1337. Thank you for the clarification. I know we just did those 2 budgets. Thanks.
No problem. Matthew Tuma, again, for the record, Deputy Director. So the reserve level is a little low in the governor's request budget, and a normal part of the process will be to rerun rates and cost allocations for all of the budget accounts, all the internal service funds. And so we would work with LCB staff and GFO staff to rerun that cost allocation to make sure that there's the appropriate approved reserve days in that budget account.
Okay, thank you for that. So next question is from Assemblyman Miller.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for the presentation this morning. Quick questions on Budget Account 1371. We're looking at the new positions here, the Management Analyst and the Accounting Assistant. Can you just provide for us some context on how the financial management and oversight of the CIP projects will improve and ensure that the accounting and reporting requirements are completed in a timely manner?
Daniel Marlowe for the record. With the capital improvement program, the consequence of error is significant. There's large amounts of public money which involve a public trust. ASD's involvement with the capital improvement program is integral for the overall management. As noted on the staffing slide, we have 4.5 FTE for the capital improvement program. That's one position and one person at each level. So one person for data entry, one person for review and approval of that entry, one person for contract processing, and then one person for the management. So the 1.5 billion all go through data entry, one person. So the accounting assistant 3 would add a second person as backup if our existing staff member wants to take a vacation. I don't have somebody that can do that entry because the complexity of the capital improvement program. Most of those transactions, we get an invoice from the vendor. We can't simply just pay that invoice. We don't have a pot of cash since the 78th session to simply pay that. We have to do revenue transactions as well. We have to understand, following NRS 341146, the order of spend. So if the specific project has 4 different funding sources, we have to understand those funding sources, know what order those need to be processed in, and then complete revenue transactions to receive the cash, monitor that for when that comes in, then be able to pay that invoice following that process. So that accounting assistant 3 will provide that data entry support so that we can meet the 30-day requirement under NRS 338 for the 30-day payment. The management analyst 3 will take many of the transactional duties that the management analyst 4 currently does, so that the management analyst 4 can focus on the overall management, especially the bond aspect of the capital improvement program. And the MA3 will focus on the contract review, ensuring those revenue transactions are completed, kind of the oversight of the accounts payable and accounts receivable to make sure that we can meet that 30-day timeline.
Okay, thank you. Chair, I just have one more question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm curious about the document management system that you're looking to bring online. Can you just provide some detail on that particular system, where we are in the process? Is it an off-the-shelf system? Just some context on that, please. Thank you.
Certainly, Daniel Marlowe for the record. Our intent with the document management system is to procure licenses on the potential statewide application. Currently, there's a system through Nevada State Library and Archives called OnBase. There is a decision unit requesting to transfer that to the enterprise IT services. Our intent is to utilize that service and maximize the economies of scale of whatever that system ends up being, so that we don't have to pay kind of the different modules and startup costs. We would just be buying user licenses for that. That system would allow us to manage statewide billings, and facilitate all of the document transfer instead of using interoffice mail or manually emailing all those out. So again, it's simply the user licenses on whatever that overall system is, instead of spending extra funds for our own build system.
Any additional questions on this budget? Okay, so then we will move to budget 1363 and 1346. We'll take those together.
Good morning. My name is Mandy Bosmith. I serve as the administrator for the Department of Administration's Division of Human Resource Management. Thank you for having us this morning to explain our budget to you. On slide 14, you see our structure in the Division of Human Resource Management, or DHRM. We have an administrator, and then we have 4 main teams. Our first team is Human Resources Services. This comprises 38 full-time equivalents, and this is the group that does recruitment and selection. They do onboarding, they do agency HR services work, so we support departments and divisions that don't have their own HR shop. We do recruitment for them, we do onboarding, we do training. This is also the shop that has classification, the classification program. Then we have employee and labor relations. There are 17 FTEs allocated to this team. This is the team that works with employees statewide on things like grievances under NAC 284. They also work with the collective bargaining agreements. We are currently in negotiations for successor agreements for those bargaining agreements. This group also runs the Employee Management Committee and supports our Personnel Commission. We have an Organizational Change and Development Group. This has 14 FTEs allocated to it. This is where we have our Office of Employee Development and our really high-level leadership training. We're very proud that we have the certified, the CPM program that we have been running for 19 cohorts now. We're in the 19th cohort, I believe. And we also do the mandatory training for both employees and supervisors. Things like sexual harassment prevention, things like defensive driving, things like drug alcohol, those kinds of training classes. And then we have central payroll records and compensation. So you guessed it, this is where the central payroll shop works. This is how employees statewide get paid, most employees. And this is also where central records are housed and where our compensation program is run from. We are moving forward in this biennium with some updates to the Nevada Revised Statutes, Chapter 284, and the Nevada Administrative Code, Chapter 284. The DHRM retained an HR consultant, an outside consultant, in 2022 to perform an analysis of the NRS and NAC pursuant to the state's personnel program. In conjunction with work done by that consultant and the recommendations that they're making to us, and in light of Executive Order 2023-002, we are moving forward with proposed changes to NRS 284, and we have drafted some proposed changes for consideration by this body at some point, by the legislative body. And following approval of those proposed changes, we intend to work to streamline the regulatory piece for human resources. So that's NAC 284. What we're trying to do is really move the human resources program at the state of Nevada into the 21st century, right? We are really trying to innovate, we're trying to update, we're also trying to streamline and make the process more efficient and effective for departments and divisions to handle recruitment and selection. And to that end, we have some big projects that are coming up that one of it is collaborating with the Office of Project Management in the implementation of the new Human Resources Information System. We are also undertaking NRS and NAC 284 changes. And because of those changes, we are developing and implementing a new HR certification program where we train the human resources staff in departments and divisions to consistently and effectively apply the HR best practices that we train them on in terms of their own recruitment and selection, so there's consistency across the state. We also are developing an HR business partner program where we're going to partner with agencies. They will have a business partner assigned to them, one point of contact that can help them with any questions or concerns they might have with HR matters, particularly in the areas of recruitment and selection. And in light of what we're getting in terms of the information from the consultant and the executive orders, we are going to attempt to undertake a statewide classification study. This study will likely produce changes to the 1,181 current job classifications that we have at the state of Nevada. Things like removing barriers to entry for candidates, things like making sure that our minimum requirements are up to date and actually relevant these days. We do have job classifications that have been out there for 20 years without being touched at all. So we really need to do a comprehensive review of those, and we intend to do that during this biennium. Additionally, we intend to do a comprehensive compensation program review and update. We intend to put forward a new pay philosophy for the state of Nevada that we hope encompasses the things that the legislature has told us they are looking for in terms of our compensation package. And the resulting program will look very different than what the program looks like now, based on the information that we are receiving and the feedback we're getting from departments, divisions, and from this body. Our division enhancement requests for this biennium, we have asked to eliminate 3 positions. This is not because we don't need the people. This is because we cannot fill these positions at their current specification and grade. And these are 3, what these positions do is very important, but we want to make sure that we have our highest level analysts approaching the Title VII investigations and the sexual harassment and discrimination investigations. And to that end, we've moved toward a more generalist model. We're moving toward a more generalist model, and we're assigning analysts the investigative work, and we are hoping to continue to do that. The elimination of these 3 positions is just because we cannot fill them, and it's my preference that we have analysts doing this work anyway. We also have asked for increased travel and training to support outreach recruitment, specifically in the areas of labor relations and our veterans program. We are currently working with the Governor's Finance Office on potential budget amendments. These budget amendments include helping us restructure the DHRM so that we can effectively move toward that generalist model. And it contemplates 8 positions that were given to us in the last interim for the support of the HRIS and the processes we need to run to keep the HR Advantage system up and running while we're doing the implementation. So this request contemplates those positions becoming permanent so that we can effectively continue operations. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
So thank you for that. Can you guys go ahead and just do the next budget as well, and then we'll take the questions for both? Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is James Gast. I serve as the administrator for the Mail Services Division. The division provides timely, secure, and dependable mail services to participating state and local government agencies while ensuring compliance with U.S. Postal Service regulations. We provide services in the Carson City, Reno, and Las Vegas areas. Service includes pickup, processing, and delivery of outgoing mail, which also includes overnight inter-office mail to and from the Carson City and Las Vegas locations without the use of the Postal Service. The Carson City location also handles production services, including folding, inserting, address validation, and bulk mailing for customers. Typically, a lot of those agencies, DETR, welfare, supportive programs, things like that, recertifications, DMV titles, license renewals, those kinds of things come out of our office and are distributed to the public. We recently became a division established in July 2021. Prior to that, we were under the direction of the Nevada State Library and Archives. The purpose of this change was to have a dedicated focus on efficiency and innovation, and to allow the division to fully focus on its unique functions, while also allowing an NSLA administrator to do the same. As the administrator, I'm responsible for the overall operation of Mail Services Division, planning, coordinating, managing services and activities in accordance with legal and regulatory requirements. I make decisions that significantly impact the state mail services division, authorize overtime, look at temporary staffing solutions based on workload, determine the process required to achieve results with resource constraints. We have 21 FTEs. 6 of those are in Vegas. Vegas is a lot smaller operation. They do not have the processing aspect of mail services, so they're not doing the mass jobs of folding, inserting, address validation, those things I mentioned earlier. They basically, pick up mail from Las Vegas offices and then send those directly to the post office. Since becoming a division, I want to just go over some of the improvements we've made to daily operations. So since we've done that change, we've been working closely, collaborating with a lot of the divisions and resources that we have. We provide all agency memos to all of our customers regarding rate increases, delays, and changes that could be happening through USPS regulations. We've also improved customer service through oversight, communication, and accountability. That kind of goes with the all agency memos. We're readily accessible for our customers if they have questions about billing or what we're capable of doing for them service-wise. Since we've, some of the things that we've worked on to improve the daily operations would be, we worked on property disposition. A lot of the equipment that was over at Mail Services was beyond life. This includes mailing equipment, also computer systems that needed to be updated, upgraded. We've worked with NSLA's record and retention unit to dispose of any records that were past retention schedules, but also to clean up some clutter and get those properly stored with the records unit. We've worked with EATS to address cybersecurity concerns with our operating systems. Some of our programs we were using in operating systems were out of compliance using older than Windows 10 operating systems, so we've been working to upgrade all of those systems as well. We've been collaborating with ASD, purchasing, buildings and grounds, agency HR services, LCB, EATS, all of these different agencies to make sure that we are taking actions appropriately as described by policy and regulations. Ensuring that staff are up to date on mandatory trainings and are receiving timely performance evaluations. Leadership staff have additionally taken professional development classes that are outside of the required or mandatory training. So we like to offer that to our staff just to improve professional development. We have developed accounting procedures for customer billing that weren't in place before. We've done little audits on things, ensuring agencies that are receiving service or paying for service. There's often lots of buildings have multiple customers in an office and things like that. So there was situations of, I guess you could say, piggybacking or something like that that we've looked to address and make sure that they're participating in the rates calculations. Another thing that we have done since becoming a division is established a uniform policy and a dress policy. Staff are now outfitted with a mail services uniform. This kind of popped up during the pandemic, but it was always a concern of mine. Obviously, the mail services people were picking up mail from parole, probation, Supreme Court, all these places containing PII, confidential information. So it's good to have staff that are easily identifiable entering these places, knowing who they're handing, our customers knowing who they're handing their mail over to. We also worked with ASD to create a billing tracking system through SharePoint. The old system that we inherited back in July of 2001 was operating on a very old operating system, like I mentioned earlier, Windows XP, and it was ready to crash at any moment, so we transferred that over to a more modern solution. We also created a division vehicle policy, and we also worked with ASD to revise rates for services based on updated labor allocation analysis. Let me see here. Okay. One of the things that we also worked on was we just put in a work program to have approval to update our mailing equipment. Mail Services has a lot of its equipment was owned by the state. It was over 20 years old, 15, 20, 25 years old, depending on the equipment. Some of that equipment was forcing Mail Services to use older operating systems due to compatibility. So we've been working to replace all of those with modern solutions and to switch it over to a leasing model where appropriate and purchasing outright where appropriate. Due to the high level of traffic of the mail load, the workload, many of our machines are not worth owning due to the wear and tear. There's lots of springs, conveyor belts, things like that, rollers that wear down and need to be replaced. So having a leasing model allows us to, on these certain pieces of equipment, replace those after the term. So whether it's 3 or 5 years, we can tell the vendor, we're done with this one, we wanted a brand new one. It's ran through, millions of pieces. So with that as well, there's a lot of benefits that come with these new systems. There's a lot of redundancy that's eliminated through our old systems, for example, have two screens that the operators need to work with. They require 2 network cables to function, 2 keyboards. These newer machines cut down on all of that redundancy. We also have, with this new equipment, we do have a new software that is coming called SendPro Analytics. We've already started dabbling in that over the past couple months. It's been very beneficial. It's a cloud-based software. Our old software was tied to a specific computer in our office. This is accessible by anybody, anywhere, as long as you have the password credentials. It also provides analytics, so postage saving reports can come from this. We can identify classes of mail, whether it's first class or if it's gone through automation process for a discount. If it's a priority package, all those kind of things, we can break down those analytics for our customers or whoever may be asking for that. So I'm very excited about the software improvement that we've made and that we're moving towards. It'll also help with our performance measures as well, with certain aspects of our performance measures. Let's see here. We got a couple related. We have related costs associated with newly established uniform policy. That's E249. That's just 3 shirts, basically 3 shirts that say Mail Services Division, have the logo, the state logo on it. New employees receive 3 shirts, and the schedule is 1 new T-shirt every year. We reestablished the transfer of equipment depreciation amounts to the Mail Services Equipment Budget Account. And then we also have the standard equipment replacement in E7 or E710. And then the last thing we had was E225, which was funding for 5 Adobe Acrobat Pro licenses. This is just to modify documents, work with contracts, invoices, billing, all those kinds of things. And that's, I guess that's, do you guys have any questions for me?
Yes, we will have questions for you. So what we're going to do, we're going to ask questions on 1363, and then we're going to ask questions on the next budget.
Okay.
So I don't know if both of you guys can come to the chairs or add a chair. All right, so I will go to Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you so much, Chair, and I apologize for having to step out. One of the pipes in my house burst this morning, apparently. So we are triaging home ownership too. So I missed some of your presentation, and I apologize for that. This is an area of particular interest for me. Last session, I brought AB 365 to try and address some of the concerns I was hearing from employees at the state with not feeling like they had recourse or were being heard in certain situations. And first of all, would like to get an update on how that's interplaying with some of the other work that the HR division is doing, or if it's on hold until the Smart 21 system gets up and rolling. So if you could give us a quick update on that.
Sorry, my arms aren't long enough. For the record, Mandy Bosmith, DHRM Administrator. Thank you for the question. We are working to, we started to overhaul the system that we currently have in place under NAC 284 for complaints and also for grievances for employees. Part of this is incumbent upon us to go out and train employees so that they know where they can go for these kinds of things, right? In prior years, we haven't done a very good job of that. So there are a lot of employees that had no idea that they had recourse or they had an avenue that they could go down in order to file complaints or to file grievances or to get something resolved. So we are working on updating the NAC 284 process because, as you all are aware, we have collective bargaining now. And in the collective bargaining agreements, there are very proscribed grievance processes and there are very prescribed complaint processes. And so we're looking at trying to mirror the CBA processes for NAC 284 because they are more efficient, they're more effective. We also, yes, part of our electronic reporting system for complaints and grievances is on hold with updates in terms of the new SAP system. And actually, we have a pretty great module that's coming on for, and really user-friendly, much more user-friendly than what we have right now, for employees to file. Part of the HR certification program I spoke about in my presentation will include training for HR professional staff in departments and divisions on how they can let employees understand and know where they can go to make complaints or to file grievances or even to get things like mediation. We have a mediation program that's quite successful in DHRM, and we offer it to every state employee, to all departments and divisions, and so we're trying to use those avenues more effectively.
Thank you, and I'm excited to see this work its way through the ranks. I think it's important that folks feel like they have recourse and are being heard in a variety of situations, not just the most egregious of situations. So I look forward to that. I have Yeah, so I'm sorry. I have a couple of questions in different areas, so I'm trying to track and make sure that we don't bounce around too much. My next question has to do with the governor's executive order to address the challenges in recruiting and retaining employees. We've been working on this for a minute. We had an interim finance committee approval for a report, an analysis done in your office on recruitment and retention. I understand that we're moving through the phases of this and expect to see something. And again, I probably missed your update in the presentation, so I apologize for the redundancy. But can you talk a little bit about how the work with the Simmons groups will is being impacted or will incorporate some of the executive order that was just initiated?
Thank you. For the record, Mandy Bosmith, DHRM Administrator. You are correct. We put forward a work program in 2022 in order to retain the Simmons Group to perform an in-depth analysis of NRS 284 and NAC 284. And the reason for this was, like you said, we've been working on this for a while. The reason for this is the need to really update what we do at the state in terms of our human resources program. And we also needed an outside perspective, because when you serve in the state, when you are employed by the state, you are in the state institutional mythos, and sometimes we can't see the forest for the trees in terms of things that need to be changed or things that might be barriers to entry that we perhaps can't see. So we wanted an external third party to do that analysis for us so that we could get good data. Executive Order 2 came out, and frankly, we were pretty pleased that we were already a little bit ahead of Executive Order 2, having brought on Simmons Group. We held a workshop, Director Robb held a workshop with some key folks from departments and divisions, and we received some really amazing feedback from folks in terms of barriers with NRS 284. And then this is what we're going to put forward in terms of the proposed changes to NRS 284 as a result of Executive Order 2 and what the Simmons Group has given us. And then we intend to then streamline our regulations. So we would go back and look at NAC 284 for the processes and the system, how we run the system. This afternoon, in fact, we are going to hear from Simmons Group. They're going to give us some of the results of their analysis. So we can have an update for you pretty soon about what they're recommending. But it's very exciting. It's a big undertaking for my team, and there's a lot of growing pains across the state because the state has done things how the state has done things for, a long time. So there's going to be some growing pains with this, but we are hoping that we're going to be able to streamline, make it more effective, and make it easier for departments and divisions to get folks.
Do you have a?
Madam Chair, may I follow up? Jack Robb, Director of Department Administration, for the record. Ms. Bowsmith spoke about a workshop that was put together about 3 weeks ago. Simmons Group did attend that. The workshop, I sent out an email after Executive Order 2 went out to all agency heads asking for individuals within their agency, whether high-level staff or on-the-ground staff dealing with the hiring issues at the state of Nevada, to come together and have a brainstorming session. I had overwhelming response from agencies. We had over 85 people show up. That would have been too large of a group to have a constructive meeting. It was all day, 8 to 5, and we went through NRS 284. We didn't focus on items that many thought needed to change to simplify some processes. We focused exclusively on recruitment and retention. We focused on that only. We spent all day on that. Simmons Group was present. There was 20 of us in the room. When we were done with that, we took all those notes and sent it out to the 85 that had signed up and got additional feedback back. After that feedback was received, we have a final draft that's sitting in the governor's office now. It will be part of a bill coming forward. It is widely supported by agency heads, agency personnel statewide. It is a long overdue change in processes. As a former deputy director of another agency and a customer of human resources and everything else the Department of Administration does, things needed to change so we could be more efficient and serve the public better. So I believe what we're going to bring forward with the Simmons Group help, with the recent workshops we've had and all their outreach we've done, we will bring a product that is going to change the way we do business and simplify processes and hopefully retain employees, but give us other avenues to recruit and make us a whole workforce so we can be efficient for the state.
I love what I'm hearing, and I look forward to seeing the BDR when it's drafted. We've heard from PEB also that there was a survey conducted, but surveys are only as good as the questions that are on the surveys. So it sounds like this might be a better resource for really understanding what's going on within the state agencies. However, some of what you were saying about the undertaking, right, and kind of pressure on your office brings me to really my follow-up question. Sorry. Your compliance officers, I realize that your division probably has more folks than those who are just working on investigations. But with the loss of those 3 positions, and really giving them up, like if we approve the removal of those FTEs, you can't have them back unless you come back and ask for them back. I would wonder if you really believe that the workload can be handled by the folks that you have, or if what we need to do is look at adjusting those positions and making them more sustainable through a class increase or something like that. Maybe you lose 1 instead of all 3, but just what does the workload look like, and what's really the need in your division for or your department for that workforce or not?
Jack Robb for the record. I appreciate the question through the chair to Assemblywoman Peters. We are looking at staffing of DHRM, but we're also looking at some of the functions in the updates to 284. Some of this work is going to go back to agencies where the subject matter experts are in the building or in the agency that can help through the HR process, instead of having to go through Ms. Bowsmith's shop and determine whether this individual qualifies to work in water resources or qualifies to be a wildlife biologist or whatever it may be. That was a tax on Ms. Bowsmith's shop in the past. A lot of those functions in our rewrite will look at putting those within agencies and changing the structure of human resources and the function of human resources. So I think we're staffed at the level to make the changes that we need going forward.
I just want to clarify, and that includes with the removal of these 3 positions.
Jack Ruff for the record, yes, that does include the removal of those 3 positions.
Thank you for that. So I have a couple of questions on this budget before we move to the mail one. So staying on the compliance investigators, which it's my understanding they also were supposed to be a part of the retaliation, sexual harassment, and other things that were in their scope to investigate, correct? And in your testimony, I was listening where you were saying that the complaints prior to were lost or not filed, or so, and you can clarify whether or not I heard that correctly, but I'm wondering, number one, how many complaints around retaliation, sexual harassment have gone through, right? How many of them were lost in the space or because of processes or whatever the disruption was? Because I'm not really clear on exactly what was the disruption, why an employee who may have felt that they had a retaliation claim couldn't potentially file it or move forward with it. So if you could just dig into that a little bit more for me, I would appreciate it, and clarify any misstatements or things that I didn't hear.
Certainly. For the record, Mandy Bowsmith, DHRM Administrator. So to clarify, there are not claims that have been missed or not filed. When I was talking about making the filing easier, it's because we have employees that don't know that they have the avenue open to them to be able to do it. But when we get a claim in the Sexual Harassment Discrimination Investigations Unit, we investigate the claim. There are a couple of things that we have to be mindful of. One of them is the federal guidelines for investigating these kinds of cases say that you can file a case up to 300 days after the event. So sometimes it takes us a significant period of time to be able to investigate an old claim like that, because somebody didn't come forward immediately, they came forward months later, and then we need to dig into that and figure out what's going on. I can give you some numbers that might help you sort of contextualize this. In calendar year 2022, we had 93 complaints filed in our electronic system. Of those, 59 were investigated, 6 were substantiated, 53 were unsubstantiated. Now, the balance between those that were filed and those that were investigated encompass employees that maybe filed a complaint, but it wasn't the appropriate venue. Perhaps they actually had a grievance that needed to go through the 284 process or the CBA process, or perhaps they were filing the complaint and alleging something that we were not able to look for, to find a nexus with Title VII on. And so an example of this is we got a lot of complaints, as you might think, regarding COVID, regarding the mandates for vaccination, the mandates for testing. And so we got a lot of complaints in terms of hostile work environment because departments were carrying out the governor's mandate for vaccinations and testing. So in terms of whether we have the ability to address the complaints that come in, we absolutely do. What we are trying to do in DHRM is we are trying to move to a more generalist model, meaning our analyst group has the ability to do whatever task or whatever case or whatever item we need them to address, and we can move those resources where we need them more fluidly instead of having a siloed structure where these 5 people only do recruitment and these 5 people only do this thing and these 3 people only do investigations. We are, and in this way we're trying to develop more robust employees too, in terms of what we're doing. And the more people that know what's going on and know how to address these things in the DHRM, the better the service is going to be to employees and departments and divisions. And that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Thank you for that response. And I actually appreciate cross-training, right? I appreciate the person who is like, I only know the thing that I know, and therefore I can't answer anything else. I think that creates blockheads, right? That can't function. But I want to just travel back on the, I guess, the grievance process a little bit. So it's my understanding, just to go back to the complaints, that in policy, they can file with NERC or within your unit. Do you know how many go over to NERC?
For the record, Mandy Bosmith, DHRM Administrator, I do not know the number of claims that go directly to NERC versus coming to us.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. And now I'm going to switch up a little bit, and I'm going to go to questions on the recruitment piece that you mentioned. And there, in slide 16, you talked about the compensation program update and an overhaul of the state compensation system. And I guess the first thing that popped up in my mind was dollar signs. How much is that going to cost? And so if you could address that, and then I'll go to my next question, and it's still in that area.
For the record, Mandy Bosmith, DHRM Administrator. Yes, it's going to cost money. I do not have a figure, but if I had to estimate what it might cost for the complete classification study and the compensation study and those updates, I would guess in the range of $500,000 we're talking about 1,181 job classifications. We're talking about 13 pay policies, including unclassified pay policies, executive pay policies, and classified employee pay policies. So yes, it's going to take considerable effort, and it's going to take some money. But I am confident that this is the direction the state needs to move in order for us to be competitive as an employer. It's also the direction we need to move in to better serve our citizens. And in DHRM, we are one of the only true internal service departments or divisions that exist in the state of Nevada, and it's our job to serve state employees and candidates for employment. We can do that better with an updated and overhauled system.
And so do you have an idea of what that timeline would be? I'm assuming that is some of that work being done by the Simmons Group, or is it going to be tacked onto the Simmons Group?
For the record, Mandy Bosmith, DHRM Administrator. We intend to use the Simmons Group to help us undertake the classification study and the compensation study. Whether we need to look at contracting with another party to help us accomplish it and maybe accomplish it more quickly, remains to be seen. And that's some conversations that we need to have with Simmons Group going forward about what they believe they can undertake, what resources they have to be able to help us with this. We're talking about 19,000 positions in the state of Nevada. That's a lot of people, it's a lot of positions, and it's a lot of analysis work for how we need to make changes. In terms of a timeline, we've been talking internally about a phased-in approach, so attacking certain occupational groups and phasing in classification changes, phasing in potential compensation changes. Of course, we would need to come back before the interim finance committee or something like that in order to get these things approved. But we want to try to do a phased approach so that by the time we get to 25, we have a good idea of where we need to go and how we need to move people for that next biennium.
Thank you for that. And that leads to my next question, and then we can move to mail. So in this phased-in approach, because when you started talking about barriers, the Simmons study, are you going to phase in occupations based on the barriers, the high barriers that you may have heard in the survey? I don't understand like how you're prioritizing the phase in. And I'm also super curious about the actual barriers that were stated within from the employees who showed up, because it would make sense, right, if you're doing, because it's more than just the compensation and the classification, it's also how to bring people in the door, right? And so in order to bring folks in the door and then examine why they couldn't get in the door, two, if there was, I'm not interested because the compensation is horrible, I don't like the classification that I believe that I should be in because I'm coming from somewhere else and I believe that it should be X, then that barrier seems to be I guess, a decision point in my mind on how you would then create a plan, phase in groups, because it's about who needs what the most. And so just talk to me about how you would select those occupations. How does the barrier conversation fit into it? And then give an example of barriers that you know exist that fall into kind of that three-part analysis that I'm kind of asking for.
Jack Rowe for the record. I'll start and then I'll let Ms. Bowsmith follow up. We're looking at occupations such as frontline people at DMV, frontline people at PEB, frontline people at other agencies. They're not all, they all have similar job duties, but they're not all paid the same. So when you look at DMV, they bring in individuals, and those individuals stay there for a little while, and they figure out that PEB has a similar job that pays more. We are using some agencies as a recruitment tool for other agencies, so we're not able to fully staff all agencies because people continue to move through. We could be much more efficient if everybody was paid the same for the same type of work, so you can bring them in and advance them up through that agency instead of having them jump around agencies and be in a continual learning mode, and that's what we're currently doing, and that's just one example I've heard of a lot lately. But I'll let Ms. Bowsmith add on to that.
For the record, Mandy Bowsmith, DHRM Administrator. To answer your question with specifics, what we are finding is that the model of evaluation of candidates that has been historically used in the state of Nevada, both by the DHRM and by human resources professional staff in departments and divisions, is very constraining. It's very rigid. One of the things that is a demonstrated barrier that we found that we are trying to come up with a plan to address, and this also goes back to that HR certification where we're going to train for consistency across the state, is evaluations of education. In a lot of our job classifications, especially the professional job classifications, you will see a minimum qualification requirement of a bachelor's degree or X amount of program work, study work in a certain area, or X amount of professional service in a similarly situated job function that was perhaps lower. And then it says, or an aggregate, right, I'm sorry, or an aggregate of those things, right? The truth is, we don't have a good measure of what the aggregate should look like in order to pass people through who may not have a bachelor's degree, but they absolutely have the talent, the ability, the knowledge and skills to be able to do the job we need them to do, but they are perhaps being denied at the first line because they automatically don't have a bachelor's degree. And we're not applying consistently what that aggregate experience looks like. So that's an example. And that's an example that is tangible, that we know is occurring, and we're trying to come up with ways to address that. Additionally, there, in terms of the occupational groups and how we're going to decide who goes first, my idea, and this is a conversation I need to have with Simmons Group as we are going forward in the phases of this process. My idea is to look at certain occupational groups that are in high demand right now and that are also relative to public safety. That's a big concern for everybody. We know it is. So as an example, our 13,000 series is our sworn law enforcement officers, right? I would propose that we would go first in evaluating those job classifications and that compensation structure. Additionally, our 12,000 series and our 11,000 series contemplate professional healthcare staff and non-licensed healthcare staff. So mental health technicians, nurses, those kinds of jobs. We need to do, and the problem is we're not competitive in those particular job classifications, and really we're suffering from not being competitive. But we also are suffering from people who can absolutely do the job not being selected because we have an antiquated evaluation system for minimum qualifications and putting people forward.
Thank you for that. That was really, really good information, and you really did get to what I was asking about, because I like that you have a plan and you're thinking through those groupings, because it matters, right? You don't want to come back, ask for 500K, waste money, then 25, you're like, well, it looked like we should have, or we could have, and then we're pulling the purse string back on you because you have no idea what 25 is going to look like financially for the state. And so it's best to do the planning that makes sense for the need. I like the fact that you're tying it into the high demand occupations that the state is needs to engage in and needs to advance in terms of pay and bring folks in to fill these vacancies. So with that, thank you. I don't know if anybody had questions, if I opened anything up, but I will go ahead and move to the mail budget under 1346, which is Senator Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was originally going to ask you to provide an update on the operational changes and efficiencies that we've been able to accomplish by establishing a standalone division, but I think you did a pretty good job of that in your presentation. And so I'll just move on to the second question, and that is about the ownership versus leasing of some of the new equipment. My question is, was there some type of analysis done to determine whether this is actually a more efficient model versus, I guess, your sense that it's working well, right? Was there some type of official analysis done to suggest that this is the way to go?
Matthew Tuma, Deputy Director, for the record. I can jump in and then James can kind of clean up if there's anything to add. I think we look at needing a hybrid model going forward. That's what we currently have, of some equipment being owned and some equipment being leased. Some equipment is cheaper to own. or depending on the funding source, I know during the pandemic, we utilized some CRF funding that went to IFC for the purchase of one piece of equipment. And so that was something that ratepayers didn't have to pay, and will own that piece of equipment going forward. Some smaller items are good to own. Some items are good to lease. The benefits of a lease are that you get a constant update of equipment on a 3 or a 5 year term, and so you're not having dilapidated equipment. Some of our equipment that we own, we initially leased, and then at the end of the lease term, we decided to purchase it for a minimal amount. And that's why we also have the decision unit to catch up and begin, again, the transfer of depreciation for equipment that we own, so we can have a plan for replacing that equipment and not having to just jack up rates, but can have rates at a much more stable level going forward for the purchase of equipment or for the leasing of equipment. But it's really on a per equipment basis. One of the things that we really realized during the pandemic was that A to Z, the mail service room was antiquated. It was failing to meet expectations on a infrastructure level for the building, on an equipment level, and on from a structure and personnel level and support. And so we've been trying to address all of those problems as soon as we can through the normal processes. I know the money committees will be hearing a number of CIP projects going forward. One of those is a new mailroom, because that infrastructure is antiquated. And so certain pieces of equipment, even if we wanted to purchase them, our current facility will not support because of the electrical infrastructure and the size and space components that are necessary. And so there's certain things that we can't update at this point in time. But we're moving forward as quick as we can, and for each piece of equipment, we're going to make that decision on what we believe is going to be in the long-term financial best interest for ratepayers and for the state.
Just a quick follow-up, Madam Chair, if I could. So I think what I'm hearing is, yes, you are doing an analysis on a kind of piece of equipment by piece of equipment basis. I just wanted to ensure that it wasn't a, well, we think this is a good idea, but like that the numbers are actually ran on where we can benefit by leasing versus purchasing. Sounds like you're running them.
Matthew Tuma, for the record, yes. We're approaching that as we replace pieces of equipment and choose to go forward with a lease or a purchase. And any sort of change or departure from what our current budget is, we would either bring back to a future legislative session. I know there's some equipment pieces before you for determination in this session, as well as any changes to leasing or leasing costs. We've wound up in front of IFC on some changes to the mailroom's operations in our last 2 years.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
James Gast, for the record. I just wanted to elaborate on the analysis and things that have been done. We have met with multiple vendors regarding what the best practice would be for our workload. And the vendors have recommended that our machines, like Deputy Director Matthew said earlier, are dilapidated over a certain period of time because of the volume of mail that's going through that machine. So they recommend that we do replace those high volume machines within 3 to 5 years on a term. As far as mailing service equipment and the difference between leasing and buying outright is that there's a wide range of different equipment that mail services needs to do its job. And the amount of cost associated with that fluctuates depending on the type of equipment you get. A paper jogger can go from $800 to maybe $1,000. You know, in that scenario, that piece of particular equipment may not be worth looking at leasing or maintenance agreements. The smaller things, pressure sealer machines, range around $10,000 to $12,000. Tabletop inserters, are probably around $45,000. And we have to look at, is it beneficial for us to buy it outright or to lease it, looking at the costs and the maintenance agreements. The way the maintenance agreements work with the mailing industry is that typically they go up 3 to 5% every year annually. So there's a certain cutoff threshold there where that could no longer be beneficial versus a lease. There is some equipment that was in mail services and still is, that's been on maintenance agreements for 15 years. And with that gradually increasing cost, it becomes less practical to use that model over leasing. Plus, you're dealing with old equipment. You're not getting the technological advances that may have sprung up, in the industry when we have the ability at the end of a term to say, hey, we want to replace this with something new. So to answer your question, there has been analysis. We have had lengthy discussions with every approved vendor, 4 or 5 of them within the state. It is a somewhat narrow field, as far as options, but we have looked at our various options as far as equipment, and like Matt said, our current building has spatial constraints on the type of equipment we can purchase to get the job done. At this time, we do not have room in our current building to add additional major production equipment. So we're kind of working within those confines, to get a machine that can fit in this corner that can help us out to, complete our obligations to our customers.
Thank you for that. All right, so I think that wraps up the budget. Thank you. You guys provided really good information. I want to apologize to everyone. I did let my LA know at 7:15 that I wasn't going to be here until 8:15 because of the white wind that was coming across the valley. And what I wasn't going to do in a 2-lane highway where one was all white and one actually had tracks. I have a rental. I don't know what the tires are. And so what I'm not going to do is risk what I'm not sure of that's on the vehicle when you're saying snow tires and I don't know what the rating is. If I'm in my car, I know what my rating is on my tires and they're good, but I'm not in my car. So I apologize to everyone, but it was a safety concern for me and I drove 37 miles an hour to get here. So I apologize for being late and you guys being delayed in your hearing and presentation. Thank you for coming today, and we will go ahead and close these budgets and then open up for public comment. We'll close the budget hearing. So, is there anyone in Carson City here for public comment? BPS, is there anyone on the phone line?
If you'd like to participate in public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no callers wishing to participate at this time.
Okay, thank you for that. So our business is completed and we will adjourn Subcommittee on General Government.